I want to thank you all for being here and for your dedication to the cause for life, and also for your dedication to the political process. We heard a lot about that this morning from Bishop Thomas. It's our God-given right to fight for the unborn and the causes that we believe in: religious liberty, our families, our marriages. It's my great honor today to introduce 5 wonderful candidates who have lived their lives in deep public service, and all who are faithful people and children of God. We have a format today that I'm going to hold pretty tight because we all know politicians, statesmen have to speak to their people, and they have a lot of things to say, and often a very short period of time to do it in. So we're going to have to hold each one of the candidates, unfortunately, to 7-8 minutes. We've got 5 of them, so we're going to run through this. I'll make an introduction for each one. They'll come up, they'll share their thoughts, their ideas. We won't have time for questions from the podium, but after we're done, they will be available to talk to you and answer any of your questions. So, thank you all for joining in. Can everybody hear me back there? Okay, how about on this side? All right, we're all good. Well, our first candidate is our first candidate for Attorney General is Dave Yost. Dave began his career as an award-winning newspaper reporter, so he's very savvy about the media, for the Columbus Citizen-Journal. He later practiced law with Buchan, Yost, and Fuller in Delaware, Ohio, before serving on city council and becoming a county auditor. He served for 8 years as an elected prosecutor of Delaware County, winning notable criminal cases one after another. Dave is Ohio's 32nd state auditor. His teamwork has led to criminal convictions of more than 135 public officials and found more than $260 million in inefficiency and savings for the state of Ohio. He and his wife of 36 years, Darlene, have 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren. When not in the arena fighting for Ohioans, Dave makes music with his children and his friends, watches Buckeye football, and resists the urge to eat peanut butter ice cream. I present to you Dave Yost.
Thank you so much. Obviously, I'm not Dave Yost. I'm Darlene. I have the great fortune of being married to the best man I know. And we're kind of going to open up our lives to you a little bit on a more personal level than normally happens at when Dave gives a speech. I'm going to introduce you to the way I got introduced to the pro-life movement. I'm a child of adoption. I was adopted when I was 6 months old. And while my parents did not share their DNA with me, they shared their value for life and their ideal that we're created in the image of God and every life is precious. So I started in the world unplanned and unwanted, but my parents showed me that I am chosen and precious and very loved.
So when we met at Ohio State and fell in love and eventually got married, one of the most important things in the world to Darlene was to have somebody she was connected to. She didn't share DNA with anybody in her family, or as far as she knew, anyone on the face of the planet. And when we got married, it was very important to her that we have children. I was, quite frankly, I was philosophically pro-life. I would have been fine to wait for a while to have kids. I was a pretty self-absorbed young man. But we got pregnant, and we miscarried. And it was devastating, and it happened more than once. We went to the doctors, and the doctor told us that Darlene would never be able to carry a child to term. And then we got pregnant again.
So, 3rd time's the charm, right? So I got pregnant. About 3 months in, I started bleeding, and I thought, here we go again. The 3rd time, we did not tell anyone. when we found out that I was expecting, because I just didn't want to deal with the people feeling sorry for us. I wanted to wait till it was, till the baby was born before anybody knew that we were expecting. And
I told her that probably wasn't quite going to work.
so when I started spotting, and I thought, here we go again, I have a dear friend who shared with me what she had done. I gathered index cards, and I wrote every scripture promise about childbearing that I could find. And I carried those cards with me everywhere I went. And if I was stopped in the car at a stoplight, I would go through them, and just to build my faith. And on March 23rd, 1983, our son David Yost was born. His name's David Emmanuel, means beloved God with us, because every day that I looked at him, it was evident that God loves me and he's with us.
So that one decision all of those years ago by Darlene's mom to put her up for adoption is not just about her, but it's also about David. And then Gwen, who followed a couple of years later, and Charis, which is Greek for unmerited gift or favor. And it's our three grandchildren, Ella and Ava and Titus, and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are yet to come.
So, it was important to me that I was adopted. I really like being alive. I'm really glad that I'm really glad to be here.
I'm glad too, baby.
But I can't tell you how powerful it is to watch the generations to come after you, and to realize that life, choosing life, ripples into the future and has impact beyond what we can imagine. And I cannot wait to see what my children and grandchildren do to contribute to this world. So
They're all making a difference on the piece of the earth that they're standing on. My daughter is the probation officer at Human Trafficking Court. My son is active in his church as a leader and is helping to set the moral standard of our culture and our country. I'm so proud of all of them and so grateful that they're there. My name's Dave Yost. This is my better three-quarters, Darlene. I'm running to be your Attorney General, and I hope now you understand a little bit more about why when we say we're pro-life, it's a lot deeper than merely a philosophical conviction or something we heard over a pulpit, but it's something that comes from where we live. Thank you very much for everything you do for the cause.
Okay. Next, I'd like to introduce our next candidate, Jim Renassi. Jim was running for governor, and then we had some pieces shift on the table, and he is now running for Senate. Jim was elected to the United States House of Representatives in November of 2010 and is serving the third term representing the 16th District of Ohio. He is a member of the powerful House and Ways Committee, or as I like to call it, the money buzzsaw. In 1980, he received his bachelor's degree in business administration from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. After graduating college, Jim became a certified public accountant and went to work for the firm of Grant Thornton in Pittsburgh, specializing in their healthcare and accounting practice. In 1983, Jim left Pittsburgh and moved to Wadsworth, Ohio, where he founded LTC Management Services, a company that owned, operated, and managed nursing facilities throughout the region. Throughout Jim's long business career, he has owned and operated more than 60 entities, created more than 1,500 jobs, and employed more than 3,000 people. In Wadsworth, he was elected to 2 terms as president of the city council. In 2004, Jim was elected mayor of Wadsworth, where he successfully balanced the city's $80 million budget and converted a multi-million-dollar deficit into a surplus without raising taxes. That's good government. Jim and his wife Tina have raised 1 daughter and 2 sons. I'd like to welcome him to our stage.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I appreciate having this opportunity. I know I was here last year and had a chance to walk around and meet many of you. Look, when I talk about my faith, I always go back to my Catholic faith, and it's pretty simple. I still remember as a little boy, my mom taking us to church every Sunday at that time, Sunday morning at 9:30. My mother worked. I always said I came from a blue-collar union family. My dad was a railroad worker. My mother was a nurse. But the one thing she always taught me, and my dad taught me, were those values, those important values. And the other thing she always taught me is you always got to go to church. And I'll never forget that, because no matter what, even when she was working on Saturday nights and got back, got home at 7 or 8 in the morning, she would take us, the 3 of us, myself and my 2 sisters, to church. And we never forgot that. My mother used to always say, if you can't spend an hour with God each week, you should spend more, but at a minimum, you should spend at least that hour with God. And I always say to people, no matter where I travel across the country, no matter where I travel around the world, my wife and I, who I met when I was in 6th grade in Catholic school, my wife and I will find a Catholic church. I'll never forget, we were in England 2 years ago, and we were at Princess Diana's castle at an event with Parliament. And all of a sudden, I got up out of the chair, and I started walking through the crowd. And people were saying, this was 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday. And they said, where are you going, Renacci? And they go, we just got here started. I go, I'm going to church. And they go, church? I said, yeah, there's one a block and a half away. But here's what was interesting about that. There was 5 or 6 other members that got up and followed me. And I think that's important, too, because sometimes you have to lead people to church by example. And many of those members have never forgotten that. But I talk about my Catholic faith because I think that's the most important thing, and that's the basis of life. When people say, when I first got into politics, and I always remember this too, and many of you know Vice President Pence, and many of you hopefully understand his deep values and his principles, especially when it comes to life and God. But when I first ran, I was a novice. You heard that I was in public service. I call those part-time jobs in your cities where you try and do things. At the same time, I was running multiple businesses. But when I jumped up to run for Congress, I'll never forget, I was in a debate with other members in the Republican primary, and they asked the question, who would you most like to be if you get to Washington as a U.S. House member? And people were naming names, Jim Jordan or whatever. They came to me. I said, Mike Pence. Now think about that. That was 2009, and most people didn't even know who Mike Pence was then. But I did. I met Mike. I realized how he just truly believes in his faith and his family. And I said, if I get to Washington, that's who I want to aspire to be. And I got to tell you, Mike Pence, now Vice President Pence, is a personal friend and somebody who's a big supporter. But it gets back, I want to go back to those Catholic roots, because Mike used to always tell me at the time, Jim, when you're campaigning, never forget that you need time for God, and you need time to get away, and you need time to think about your religion, and don't ever let the campaign take you away. So one of the things I'm happy to tell you is, I've told my campaign they can never schedule anything from 3:30 on Saturday until noon on Sunday, because that's my time to really be part of my faith. I go to my Catholic church. I'm an usher. I've been there for almost 30 years. Everybody knows me at the door. Everybody wants to talk politics. I just want me to be left alone. That's my time to be with God. But I bring that as an important example because in people that are Catholic, I'll give you an example. Joe Biden says he's a practicing Catholic, all right? And you're right. And Nancy Pelosi says she's a devout Catholic, all right? But Jim Renacci has always said he's a faithful Catholic. And I think that's important. Because when you are a faithful Catholic, you know that life begins at conception to natural death. You stand with that. You don't have to think twice about it. It's as simple as could be. When you do your interviews, you don't have to worry about it. You stand with it. I tell people I'm proud of it. And I've never had to worry about it. When people say to me, whoa, what are you talking about? I go, wait a minute. we have a First Amendment in this country too, and the First Amendment allows me to practice and be faithful to my Catholic religion. And that's why, when it comes to life, it is really simple for me to stand in the pro-life community and make sure that everybody knows that I do stand for life. I've supported, just last year, almost 9 bills in the House of Representatives. I've supported the House, I've co-sponsored the House heartbeat bill, and I have voted to defund or supporting letters to defund Planned Parenthood. It's simple. These are the things that are simple. So I'm never going to be ashamed of that. I'm also the only candidate in the Republican primary that is 100% pro-life, that has a record of being 100% pro-life. I voted for it. I've been endorsed by the life community. I've been endorsed by the state life, Ohio, the life community here. I've been endorsed by the national Right for Life. So again, for me, this is pretty simple. But as I tell everyone, it's not difficult when you really believe in life to say it. You don't have to worry about interviews. You're never going to stumble on an interview. When people ask me, even before I got into this, what I call political world, again, I always it's kind of interesting. As a business guy, as you heard my background, I've been a business guy for almost 30 years. To go to Washington, I went there because they took my Chevy dealership. And if anybody doesn't know that story, it is kind of interesting because a lot of people always wonder, what's a business guy? How did you get to Washington? Well, how I got to Washington was I was a little frustrated when my dealership was taken away from me. And I'll never forget calling an individual, and it looks like I'm running out of time, but that's okay. Someday you'll hear that whole story. What I really want you to remember is, look, there is no one, when it comes to me, that is ever going to tell you that Jim Renacci isn't a faithful Catholic who's going to defend life from conception to natural death. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Our next candidate is Nathan Estruth. He's running for lieutenant governor on the ticket with Mary Taylor. Nathan was the only one I had an opportunity to meet with before today. He's a native of Scottsdale, Arizona, but Ohio has been his home since 1991. He holds a degree in political science from UCLA and did postgraduate work at Harvard. Mr. Estruth started to work at Procter & Gamble in 1991 and worked his way to vice president of a group called P&G FutureWorks, which is designed to create new brands and business models. In May of 2013, he was named the CEO of Procter & Gamble's division Influx, which was developed by the FutureWorks group. He serves on the board of directors of Fort Worth, Texas KBS Global, a private equity-backed business-to-business service and manufacturing firm. And he served on the Alliance Defending Freedom Board from 2017 to 2014. That organization describes itself as a conservative Christian nonprofit organization that advocates issues of religious freedom, sanctity of life, marriage, and family. And they have the great distinction of being called a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. He also worked as an intern on Capitol Hill for Congressman Eldon Rudd, a Republican of Arizona, in the Ronald Reagan White House in the Office of Public Liaison, and briefly worked with Jack Kemp, Office of Speechwriting at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development before being asked to help Secretary of State Ken Blackwell in Cincinnati. He and his wife, Madonna, live in Hamilton, Ohio, and are the parents of 4 wonderful children. We'd like to welcome to the stage Nathan Estruth.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thanks to all of you for being here today. The conference has been terrific. I've had the pleasure to be here since last night, and just so appreciate your engagement in all these issues. I want to share just a picture of my family. Those are our 4 kids. Couldn't be here today, but wanted to at least show you. My wife, Madonna, and I have been married for 25 years. This was obviously in December of this year. That's our son, Daniel, on the lower left. He's our eldest. He's 21 years old. Daniel has profound cerebral palsy. We've had a lot of talk about the dignity of human life and the importance of standing for life. and how it impacts all aspects of our society. Daniel was born in Hong Kong, and on December 24th, 1996, he had a massive brain hemorrhage detected at 32 weeks in utero. My wife and I were living in Guangzhou, China at the time. And the doctors in Hong Kong, of course, recommended that we terminate the pregnancy. We didn't choose life because for us there was no choice, of course. Our son, we asked, is he a boy or a girl? And we started to pray. Daniel was born 3 days later, and his head circumference was as large as his mother's when he was taken out. But he's the joy of our family. God has taught us compassion through our son. Jolene is 19 years old. She's a freshman at Hillsdale College. That'll tell you a little bit about our family. And she came home at Thanksgiving and notified Mom and Dad that God had called her to go minister to Syrian refugees in Jordan this summer. So she's preparing to leave for Jordan in May. And I have to tell you, it's one thing to go and do that yourself. It's a totally different thing when your kids start to do that. And so my heart swelled, and it also went to my throat at the same time. So just a little bit about our family. You know, as Jeff said, 26 years with Procter & Gamble. I've been a business guy, but honestly, I've never been a candidate for office. And all I've done is I've switched seats because Mary Taylor asked me to do so. My wife and I have been engaged in pro-life, pro-family causes since before we were married, from the Alliance Defending Freedom to Johnny and Friends to adoption programs through Focus on the Family, through local crisis pregnancy centers. We have been engaged, worked with many folks in this room, and I've met so many more of you in the last 24 hours. The fight that we're waging is so important, and if you just sat through George Barna's presentation, you know how important it is that we actually have champions that are entering the public square to do so. And honestly, when Mary Taylor asked me to run, we were dismissive, and we said, no, we're very engaged where we are. We're where God wants us to be. And then my wife nudged me and said, you know, we probably ought to pray about this. I said, yes, dear. And we had 6 other couples join us, and within about 4 days, it was very clear that God had other plans, and he laughed at ours. And so here I am, 8 weeks as a candidate for office. I will tell you, I stepped in because there is a clear choice, and only one choice, for an unapologetic, pro-life conservative to be our next governor of Ohio, and that's Mary Taylor. And I know that many people do not know that, and I did the research. Believe me, I was stepping away from a career and a company that I loved. Influx, I built it, you know, over the last 4 years with a great team, hired 150 folks. I had no plans to leave, even when we took that picture, okay? But God had other plans. And the choice is this: we are in a mess as a culture because the church is not showing up as the church in all domains of life. And when my number was called to help Mary Taylor, who from the beginning of her public life championed as the only woman in the State House the bill to ban abortions with no exceptions, I said, we can't say no. Mary, we'll help you. We'll do everything we can to help you become the next governor of Ohio. The choice in the Republican primary, you have 2 tickets. I need to remind you, and I do this in an attempt with grace and truth, John 1:14, grace and truth. But when we go along to get along, or we accept what people said, we have to look at the record. As a U.S. Senator, the number one job that you have is who do you confirm as judges and who do you confirm in the executive branch? Mike DeWine voted yes on Sonia Sotomayor and Merrick Garland before Barack Obama nominated them to the U.S. Supreme Court. Please remind people of that. Sonia Sotomayor and Merrick Garland have undermined our First Amendment freedoms, our Second Amendment freedoms, our 10th Amendment freedoms. They have undermined the Constitution and they've undermined life. He led the Gang of 14 that undermined the 10 most conservative judges that President George W. Bush put up. I know one of them, Judge Charles Pickering, because I sat on the board with him at the Alliance Defending Freedom. I've heard the stories. I know what Mike DeWine did. Most people in Ohio do not. Mike DeWine voted yes on those nominations even when Mitch McConnell voted no. And Mitch McConnell is not exactly a flaming conservative. Okay? Mike DeWine voted for Eric Holder to be Deputy Attorney General when nominated by Bill Clinton. Okay? You know the threats that have come down to religious freedom and life as a result of the people that I just mentioned. And it is time that we call out a record that says no one can say they're consistently pro-life or a pro-life champion who has done these things. And I want to have grace, and I want to welcome folks to the cause, but at the end of the day, we have a battle before us, as you heard in the numbers that George Barna just presented. It says, yes, as Chuck Colson says, politics is downstream of culture, but it's time that we had some politicians that are willing to swim upstream. So my time is up, or about, I guess, 30 seconds here, but I'll just mention one thing. The mommy blogger, I had the privilege of standing with her on the courthouse steps in Hamilton County a few weeks ago, along with Barry and several others in the audience, Paula. Mary Taylor and I have called it out. We will create a firewall, not only stand as champions for life, but a firewall for parents to educate and teach values to their children. We will be that firewall. As a lieutenant governor who knows boardrooms and has been an officer in a Fortune 20 company, I will stand in the fight against the business community when they try and bring sexual orientation and gender identity laws to Ohio, and it is coming. Please join us. Mary Taylor will be here a little after 3:30. We'll be out there ready to talk to you. MaryTaylorForGovernor.com. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Robert Sprague serves as state representative for the 83rd Ohio House District. Robert received the Watchdog of the Treasury Award from the United Conservatives of Ohio for his tenacious work watching over the pocketbooks of Ohioans. Robert is strongly pro-life. He's been a leader in protecting the rights of the unborn and was a co-sponsor of the Ohio Heartbeat Bill. Robert is also a staunch defender of the Second Amendment rights and has received an A- rating from the NRA. Prior to his service in the House, Bob served as treasurer and auditor for the city of Findlay. He helped Findlay improve its credit rating and lower its debt service costs. He graduated from Duke University with a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering and also holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina Tar Heels. Somebody said basketball. Prior to his entry into public service, Robert cut his teeth in the private sector, serving as at the management consulting firm of Ernst & Young. Robert advised companies from London to Singapore and throughout the United States on a number of complex business matters. He currently resides in his hometown, right down the street from me practically, in Findlay, Ohio, with his wife Amanda and their 5 children. Please give a warm welcome to Robert Sprague, our next candidate for state treasurer.
Thank you so much. And my wife Amanda and I do live in Findlay. I tell people, we have 5 children, and I jokingly say, look, having a big family nowadays is a lot like having a waterbed. It used to be that everybody had one, but now they're just weird. So it's great to be with you. I wanted to talk a little bit. I had a chance during lunch to listen to George Barna's presentation. And I can just tell you that as we're Christian. That happens to be our faith. We belong to Gateway Presbyterian Church, an evangelical Presbyterian church. And we're part of a church plant in Findlay, Ohio. And to listen that only 10% of the people in my country share my worldview is really disturbing to me, very depressing almost. And one of the things I want to mention is, we've passed a number of pro-life bills in the Ohio House. I'm currently a state representative. And one of them, I'm a co-sponsor on, Christina Hagen is sponsored. Christina Hagen has sponsored the Heartbeat Bill. She is the joint sponsor of the Heartbeat Bill, and I'm a co-sponsor along with her on that piece of legislation. And we're going to get that done this General Assembly, aren't we, Christina? We recently passed a bill, 2 bills, one that limits abortions after 20 weeks, and the other that prevents abortions for those children with Down syndrome. And one of the things that really bothers me as a legislator that's on the front lines of this issue is when people get up on the floor of the House and they say, Robert, you're conducting a war on women. What gives you the right to impose your morality onto a woman and tell her what to do with her body? And I want to build this case with you that, first of all, a woman, this is a false narrative that we are having a war on women. A woman is not terminating a piece of her body as if it's a kidney or an appendage. This is a separate human being, a human fetus, a human baby. It's a separate life. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think we need to talk about the fact that if you want to talk about what right do you have to impose morality, let's talk a little bit about rights. Where do our rights come from? The Declaration of Independence says that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that furthermore, our government is instituted among men to secure those rights. That is the primary job of government. So many times we make the mistake of thinking the Constitution guarantees our rights, when in reality our rights are given to us by a higher power. Every day when I go into the State House, on the left side, there's a plaque for the Andrews Raiders. It's a group of men from Hancock County, in my area of the state near Findlay, that volunteered during the Civil War to go on the Great Locomotive Chase. Many of them were executed behind Confederate lines as spies. And they were willing to give their lives during the Civil War because they felt that African Americans in the United States should not be enslaved, even though the Constitution didn't necessarily give African American those rights. The Constitution is not our highest power. Those rights come from Almighty God Himself. And our history as a country demand that we recognize that. So I want to continue this case that I'm laying out about rights. When do we receive these rights? This is a question I was asking myself. When are these rights conferred upon us? Is it that 9 attorneys in the United States that sit on the Supreme Court get to tell us that we don't receive those rights until the 3rd trimester? Or perhaps maybe it's at 20 weeks. Do we get those rights at 20 weeks? Once we reach 20 weeks, is that the point at which our rights take effect? Or maybe it's sooner. Maybe it's when the heartbeat of the baby starts. No, my view is that we have those rights at conception. From the very point of conception. And we retain them through natural death. My view is that these rights are fundamental. They are literally the building blocks of our democracy, of our government in the United States. They are the reason that we sit in the legislature and that you are hearing from candidates. This fundamental idea that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that governments are there to secure those rights among men. I believe that these rights are eternal. They don't strengthen as you grow older. They don't wane as you enter the nursing home. These rights are eternal. And finally, my belief is that these rights are existential. They're with us from the first moment of life until natural death. And one of the things I want to do in the Treasurer's office, I have 1 minute, and I want to share with you one policy idea for the state of Ohio. It's that I want to do something about the children that are dying in the state. We have a problem with infant mortality. And African American babies die at a rate of 4 times those of white babies in the state of Ohio. And it's wrong, and we need to do something about it. And one of the things I want to do in the Treasurer's office is introduce an innovative concept called a social impact bond. What we will do is we will get private industry to create and innovate, bring forward ideas as to how to save these children in the state of Ohio. They will float a private bond, say $1 million bond, and we'll use that $1 million bond to run a 2-year pilot program for a new infant mortality initiative. And if that infant mortality initiative is able to equalize the infant mortality rates in our state and save those children in the first year of life, then the state will buy back that bond at the end of the 2-year period. These are the type of innovative pro-life ideas I think that all of our office holders should bring to the table in this next election. Again, my name is Robert Sprague, and I'm running for the Treasurer's Office. Thank you so much for letting me be here with you today.
Okay, that was wonderful, thank you. Our next candidate, Christine Hagan, you've just heard about her. She's running for the, excuse me, she's running for the 16th Congressional District for the United States Congress. In 2011, Christina Hagan was chosen to serve the 50th House District of Ohio. Representative Hagan became the youngest female ever to serve in the Ohio House of Representatives. Hagan proves time and time again that she knows how to run an election. She won her last campaign in 2016 by 46 points, outperforming every federal and state candidate in her district, including President Trump. After her initial election, Representative Hagan graduated with a degree in business from Malone University. 3 terms later, Representative Hagan has served in multiple leadership positions, most notably being made Midwest Chair of the ALEC Women's Caucus and Vice Chair of the Energy and Natural Resource Committee for the 131st and 132nd General Assembly. Hagan was also named by Forbes magazine as a 30 under 30 for all of her legislative work in returning Ohio back to better position than it was. She was chosen to chair the Electoral College of Ohio for President-elect Donald Trump. While doing all these things, she says that what makes her most proud and most fulfilling is to be the mother to her daughter, Josephine. She's married to her husband, Adam. I'd like to welcome to the stage candidate for the 16th Congressional District, Christina Hagan.
What a blessing it is to be here today in a room full of God-fearing, life-upholding individuals and to sit at a table with candidates who hold those beliefs and to have a congressman of our own who has already voted to defund Planned Parenthood. That is fantastic. And I've been incredibly thankful to have colleagues like Robert Sprague who have stood beside me in the state legislature as I took the helm on the Fetal Heartbeat Protection Act. As you can imagine, I didn't know quite what I was getting myself into when I got that started, but it took me a year of prayer before I dedicated myself to that cause specifically. And when I was a little girl, it was the pro-life issue that I understood before any other type of legislative issue. Even though I grew up in the apartment above our family's small heating and plumbing business, I understood how government can infringe and limit your ability to provide jobs. But it was the children that everything circled around in our family. And growing up with foster brothers and sisters, being the youngest and the only girl, I learned a lot about fighting for life and fighting for each other. And it seemed like everywhere I went with my mother, whether it was in the grocery store or whether it was at church, there was a little one peeking around the corner to give me a smile. And I can honestly say that no matter what legislative work I've accomplished, it's the ability to stand and protect the most innocent and the most vulnerable that has been the most rewarding work that God has blessed me to do. And there is no question that God has put this on my heart. And I took a good long time debating whether I was the right person, whether I was fit, whether I had the wisdom, the knowledge, or the ability to be able to stand against the great spiritual warfare that is conducted against the life movement. And just like every single person in this room, I had doubt cast upon me. And although I was in the state legislature and confident to do the job of representing the people, I didn't know if I could hold that torch. And I kept praying about it, and God just kept reminding me that just like every child that's made in utero, that I was made in the image of God, our Creator, and that we can do great things, not by ourselves, but when we lean on Him. And so, against all odds, and you would think in a Republican trifecta that we would just get stuff done, and you would think that fighting for the unborn would be easy. And you would think that all of the Republicans would band together and it would just be so simple. But our governor was running for president of the United States. He had different plans. And I'll never forget an advisor that I had and another legislator whose job was to mentor me, pulling me off to the side and putting his arm around my shoulder and saying, you know, Christina, I know that your heart's on fire for the unborn, but if you touch this political lightning rod, it will be the end of your political career. If you carry the Fetal Heartbeat Protection Act, you will never be able to get elected to office again. And I've heard that threat in different circles about the pro-life movement, just about any piece of legislation that extends life and protection to women and children in the state of Ohio. I've heard it from different people in political circles because, to be frank, a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats just don't want to talk about it. It's uncomfortable. People get uncomfortable where there is darkness, and they don't want to have those conversations. But the more we talk about it, the more the people that send us to represent them have faith in our capacity to lead and are thankful. And you know, that voter percentage, that wasn't me, that was God working. That was Democrats and independents crossing over to support a conservative, fiscal and social conservative Republican. And I give all of the glory to God in that, because He's given me the backbone that is necessary to be a part of the life movement. And I look at women like Molly, and I think how incredibly blessed Northeast Ohio is. I think about Value Voters Northeast Ohio, Diane Stover, and I think about Pastor Booker, who came to me when I was attacked by Brent Larkin and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and they threw verbal assaults at me and attacked me as a legislator and said that I only think about my Christianity and that I'm worshiping Jesus Christ, Stephen Bannon, and Donald Trump in no particular order. And I just thought they would love nothing more than to make us look crazy, fringe, outlier individuals. But when you see people like Nathan Estruth stand here and talk about the need so intelligently, it's easy to see why the opposition casts stones and calls names, because they see the truth shining bright and they know they have to work hard to defeat it. And so I wear that editorial as a badge of honor, that I stood for what God called me to do in the legislature, and albeit unpopular at times, we have preserved and protected lives because of that. Unfortunately, our governor vetoed the bill. We did get it through the House and the Senate, and many charades have occurred in our time in the legislature over the last 7 or 8 years trying to get that bill accomplished. But what I can tell you is I've only become bolder and more convicted in my desire and my need to stand for life. And that's why when I go to Washington, D.C., not only are we going to be strong on fiscal issues, not only are we going to cut taxes and protect your right to bear arms, but we are going to unabashedly, unapologetically stand for the lives of unborn children in this nation. Again, we all think of these causes that exist, and we think, wow, it's such a great cause. There must be somebody that's going to be fighting that. There must be a coalition. There must be somebody. But then you get to the front of the picket line and you realize it's me. It's us. It's each and every person in this room. If you don't show up, nobody is going to highlight this need that exists. And so I just feel incredibly blessed and thankful to be in this room and be present with you here today. I know that every life is precious. I know that when I served with Lynn Watchman, he was a mentor to me. He originally carried the heartbeat bill. And I'll never forget him saying, there is no issue that is more important than life, because if we don't have life, then we don't have jobs and we don't have an economy. And I think we heard about somebody that was pushed to potentially abort out of country. I mean, the entire world is trending this way. However, even in liberal nations like Europe, they stand and protect their young at an earlier point in the pregnancy than we're willing to do in the most civilized and advanced, medically prepared nation on earth. That is simply unacceptable. And again, to be at the March for Life and to hear the voice of people that are willing and wanting to protect innocent human life, it's a blessing to be a part of this cause. And I think To be a woman in this cause is so great because we get to come beside our men and work beside our men who are attacked on a regular basis for being outside of a space that culture tells them that they can exist. And so I applaud these gentlemen for standing up, and I'm thankful to God for giving me my identity in Christ and my identity as a daughter of the kingdom, and letting me know that I have the ability to come where there is a void and help to prepare a way for children to be born into this nation, and for our nation to be restored to greatness and to be a light for the world instead of a perpetuation of the darkness. I think this is my cue. I will head out of here, but thank you so much. God bless, and keep fighting for life.
I'm reminded of William Jennings' Cross of Gold speech, how much it applies tonight or today. We stand in Armageddon in battle for the Lord. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been blessed by 5 outstanding Christians who are willing to stand up for the fight for life. The primary season is coming up. Please keep them in your prayers. They'll be available to answer questions. On behalf, candidates, on behalf of the Bring America Back to Life Convention, we thank you for coming, making the effort to be with us, and sharing your views on pro-life. God bless you all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.